Joined now by Alex Newman, our international correspondent. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, dude. Great to be with you.
Well, we have an interesting story that you've written for the Newman Report about third graders in, I believe it's Los Alamitos School District near Los Angeles, who are being forced to consider the gender spectrum. Give us some information about this story.
Yeah, so we're talking kids 8, 9, maybe 10 years old. We're given an assignment where they're supposed to consider the pros and cons of a uniform, of a school uniform policy. And the assignment actually gave them the pros and the cons. And the cons were that some people may be exploring their gender identity, and they may not fall within traditional areas of the gender spectrum. And so that might be sexist. I mean, this is nonsense what they're teaching kids. But trying to get little tiny children to believe that gender is a spectrum, that there are infinite genders rather than male and female, is a nefarious plot that we've seen all over the United States. This is just simply the latest manifestation of this absolute anti-scientific nonsense being peddled to little kids.
Have we been able to see any of the pedagogy or the assignments? And what has been the response from Los Alamitos parents?
Yeah, we were able to get a copy of the assignment. It's absolutely absurd. Why should 8th graders be thinking about gender spectrums? And it talks about maybe the kids are experimenting with different gender expressions. I mean, this stuff is so hideous. And what was really sad, I thought this was even more sad than the abuse that these children are being put through, was the pathetic dad who came out and blew the whistle. And I say this with all due respect, but shame on you, Mr. Dad. He's like, well, I'm really upset about this. And the interviewer, this was from the Daily Signal, asked, well, so are you going to take your kids out of school? He's like, well, I'm going to start a Facebook group. And yeah, I mean, oh my goodness, these people. And he's like, well, I went to public school when I was little and I turned out okay. But that's what you hear from so many of these people. So his little children are being destroyed right now. They're being brainwashed into believing that there's a gender spectrum and they should consider different gender identity expressions. And his response is, it's like Stockholm syndrome or like a battered wife, right? He comes home, drunk husband beats her up, and then oh no, he's just, he's got good intentions, he loves it. I mean, it's just absolutely pathetic, Duke. And I hope parents in Los Alamitos and all across the country are realizing that this battered wife syndrome has got to stop. And it's not just you, right? If your husband was battering you, that'd be bad enough. But then when you bring the children into it, parents, come on, quit being so pathetic.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice. Dad did, though, at least raise a flag that nobody else had raised. What kind of response did we get from the school about Dad's very timid objections?
Yeah, apparently the teacher was regretful, and the dad, all we know is from secondhand from the dad, but he said that the teacher had the best of intentions, and she was only doing this because higher level officials had ordered them to do that because there was some transgender kid or something last year, and so they all had to teach this now. But apparently the principal and the school, he actually blames the school board, which was interesting. I mean, this is of course not coming in from your school board. This is usually coming in from the state and from the feds and even from UNESCO, from the UN agency. But he said it was really the fault of the school board, and so we need to kind of complain about this. And he did bring up a good point. We've got to stop the other children from being indoctrinated with this garbage. That's true. But apparently the school board and the principal have fully drunk the gender-bending Kool-Aid to the point where now they frown upon parents even raising this issue.
Not just frowned upon, they're hostile, as we saw in Loudoun, Virginia, yes. As we saw in outside of Austin, Texas, Leander Independent School District. We've seen this now. You challenged them 10 years ago, 12 years ago, public schools were begging for parents to get involved. 5 years ago, in the middle of the Common Core experiment, parents were being told, stay out of it, don't worry about it, it's none of your business. Now, parents are being attacked by school personnel for daring to challenge the moral hijacking of their kids' education. When we come back from break, Alex, I want to go a little bit deeper with this and ask what this bodes for the country. What is it that parents can do? I mean, this dad is obviously afraid to do the obvious thing, but are there things anymore that can be done by parents who have their kids in these schools? Or you and I think I have a really good conversation about why it is time to get your kids out after the break. Back now with Alex Newman, our international correspondent. We had a really great talk about what Los Alamitos school district is doing in California. They are exposing kids as young as 8 years old, third graders, to force them to consider the gender spectrum. Again, one more program that eats into your kids' time studying reading and writing and math and all the other stuff. Taking third graders, very little elementary school kids, and having them grapple with the question of gender as a spectrum. I'm not sure an 8-year-old mind has developed to the point where it could even understand such a radically abstract concept as a spectrum. Is that even possible, Alex?
No, it's absurd, Duke. But the reason they introduce it to these kids when they're so small is because if you try to tell an adult that there's a spectrum of genders and that there isn't really male and female, they'll look at you like you're a fruitcake, like you're an idiot, right? Where would you come up with something so idiotic? But when you talk to little kids are so trusting. They're so gullible. They're so naive that when an adult, a trusted adult, mommy and daddy said, listen to the teacher, tells them that there's a gender spectrum and that you should try out different gender identity expressions, they say, oh, okay. Well, that must be normal, right? Because they don't know. They don't have any point of reference. So this is really cruel to do to these children. But no, a young mind like that cannot understand that this is silly, that this is idiotic, that this is dangerous. But I think the implications are much worse than just confusing the children, Duke. I think the real agenda here is ultimately the dismantling of the nuclear family. First the homosexuals told us, oh, you don't really need a mom and a dad. You could just have two dads. Now the transgender gender spectrum fanatics are telling us, hey, there isn't really any such thing as a dad and a mom, right? It's all the same. We're all just, androgynous, gender neutral people, and any combination of people can raise any combination of children. It's dangerous, it's silly, and there's even one more objective beyond that. They don't want to dismantle the nuclear family just as an end in of itself. The goal eventually of dismantling the family is to finally move forward with this Marxist totalitarianism that they have been trying to bring into our societies for over 100 years.
Now, in this case, Dad complained the teacher was very apologetic, which I'm not sure her bosses would be proud of, and she did
Right.
pass the buck, right? This is the superintendent, this is the principal. But it doesn't bode well for a teacher if she has to apologize for this, and knowing that her bosses have mandated it. Outside of the one complaining dad, is that pretty much the only voice of parental opposition that was faced?
As far as we know from the news reports, apparently there were some other parents who were frustrated, and this dad said he's going to make a Facebook group, right? That'll last all of 30 seconds until the big tech totalitarians in Silicon Valley shut that down after shadow banning it. But apparently there are some other parents who are upset by this, and of course anybody with two brain cells to rub together would be upset by this, but whether they're actually upset enough to do the only thing that will actually protect these children and actually punish the purveyors of this child abuse remains to be seen. We know that there's a massive exodus of families fleeing the public school system, but again, like battered wives, so many of these parents just keep coming back and give me more, and beat up the kids while you're at it too. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I can't say enough about that. It's time to get the kids out. How much evidence do you need? How much evidence do you need that the public schools, it's not just that the public schools have lost their way, or they need correction, or they really need parental input. They've decided, mom and dad, that you are a hindrance. You are an obstacle to be overcome. You are backward thinking. You are on the wrong side of history. They don't believe that your opinion matters. They don't even believe you have the right to have parental control over your kids when it comes to morality, politics, sexuality, and on it goes.
Yeah, that's right. And folks, parents, you got to get them out.
Get them
That's
out.
The only option at this point.
Alex, thanks for your time. We appreciate you.